Hello, I'm Shelli Brunswick, and it's a pleasure to join America's Future Series for their Dual Use Tech Summit. I have the honor to interview Dr. Vivek Lall, the Chief Executive for General Atomics. Dr. Lall is a global visionary and strategic leader with a remarkable journey spanning esteemed roles at Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Reliance Industries Limited. His expertise in aerospace engineering and business development has earned him numerous accolades. He's been recognized for his unparalleled achievements. Dr. Lall holds prestigious titles such as the President's Lifetime Achievement Award presented to him by the President of the United States in September of 2022, and he was conferred the World Leader Award by the House of Lords in the United Kingdom in 2023. Welcome, Dr. Lall.
Thank you so much, Shelli. It's an honor to be with you.
Well, it's an honor to be with you today. Your work represents the pinnacle of innovation in defense technology and dual use application. Today, we're eager to delve into how we can leverage innovation and creative capabilities to ensure our nation's security and the security of our allies, especially in the face of growing near-peer threats and the rapid evolution of technologies. Let's explore the future of building partnerships, as well as the role of dual use and disruptive technologies. Dr. Lall, I'm going to start with collaborations. With your esteemed roles with the U.S.-Japan Business Council, the U.S.-India Business Council, and your recent participation at the India-U.S. Forum, you have a unique vantage point on international collaboration, especially in the realms of defense and dual-use technologies. Given the critical importance of synergy between the private sector, academia, and government in driving those innovations, could you share your insights on the collaboration models that you have found to be most effective?
Absolutely, Shelley. As you rightly said, in this globalized world and a technology world and all the geopolitics of the day, there are certain models that seem to work. And in my experience, when we're talking about international collaboration, I think it is several groups of stakeholders that need to come together on a particular issue and on several issues, but they largely fall into the following stakeholder brackets. One is the political spectrum. So if the political spectrum of the countries involved or the are kind of aligned in terms of the objectives, that certainly paves the way for collaboration. The second bucket, I would say, is the bureaucracy and the bureaucratic structures. As you know, they're different in every country with differing priorities depending on the local situations. And if those bureaucratic structures can marry together for a particular cause or several causes, that again paves the way for good collaboration. The third area I would say is academia and think tanks, and it's often underspoken, but I think academia and think tanks have a huge role to play in collaboration, and they're often not in the decision-making org charts on a particular issue, but they have a significant behind-the-scenes role to inform and to debate various issues. And so I think alignment with the academic communities is very important for collaboration. Then I would go as another group of stakeholders that would be involved in the collaborative model would be the industry and the industry captains, whether large, small, or medium industries. They all have a voice and they have a role to play in making sure a collaboration succeeds or doesn't. And so I think those voices are again very important. The fifth bucket, I would say, is media and communications, and to have the right perception on the problem and to debate in the public domain the pros and cons. That is very important. And finally, as a sixth bucket of stakeholders that I think is important for collaboration, it would be the end user who would benefit from whatever the collaborative model is, and making sure that the end user indeed wants that type of service or platform and that's of course critical. So with these six stakeholder buckets, I think one can form a good collaborative model. And indeed, especially when we talk international collaboration, I have found that if the stars align in all these six categories, you're able to make progress.
I love that. If the stars align, no pun intended, since we both are in the space industry as well.
All right.
Let's dive into one of those stakeholder buckets. Fostering an environment that encourages innovation is essential for staying ahead of threats. What recommendations do you have for policymakers, industry leaders, and academia to cultivate a more innovative defense ecosystem?
That's an excellent question, Shelly. And I think no one country has a lock on the best ideas in today's day and age. And so I think there is a lot of merit at looking at the startup communities in the different countries these days. When we talk about innovation, a lot of the best and brightest ideas and a lot of the startup companies that are incubating these ideas will eventually become unicorns. And so I think from an international perspective, to get more innovation, it's important to partner with startup companies and with new ideas, fresh ideas, folks coming out of academia and other institutions. And as we do that, I think another important aspect is workforce development, because in whether it's a STEM or other categories, to be able to get the best talent is going to be where the eventual competition will be in terms of innovation.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I'm a big proponent for workforce development and capacity building, not only in the United States, but around the world, bringing those underrepresented groups into the space ecosystem and technology ecosystem.
Right.
Let's pivot to the dual use technology, since that's what our summit is about today. Could you share your vision on how dual use technologies might influence future defense strategies and international security policies?
Yes, in my observation, this is a very important point. You know, there used to be a time where defense technologies would eventually end up in the commercial domain, but increasingly so, it is kind of the opposite now, where a lot of the latest and greatest technologies are in fact incubated in the commercial domain and are then applied to the defense or the space realm. And so that inherently means that a lot of the fundamental technologies which we're talking about are dual use or multi-use in that sense, and and it can spawn from any area. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the defense domain, and the ability to recognize then how they integrate into various use cases is very important and critical. And with the pace of technology uh, development being so fast as it is, I think what we have to keep in pace with is also the technology adoption into various use cases. And that certainly is no small challenge, but I think those entities that are able to do that will be able to succeed.
I agree. And I think some of what we've even seen, at one time the launch industry was completely government run, and we've seen how that's now pivoted to commercial. And now the same launch providers for both the government and industry, are the same companies, and the government is now using launch as a service. I think that's one example of dual use. The other example is, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in Silicon Valley, they're creating products and services on the commercial side and then finding a military application.
Right.
One of the examples I highlight is I know NASA has outlined their architecture for their return to the moon and onto Mars with the Artemis program, and they've laid out their architecture and where they may have some technology gaps where they'd love for industry to look at tech insertion into their government strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to pivot into a really fun topic now, disruptive technologies. A couple people have told me that, if you're not disrupting, you'll be disrupted. So I think this is a fun area to talk about, especially with your background. And as we're seeing the rapid evolution of AI, quantum computing, and unmanned systems, What do you identify as the most disruptive technologies poised to reshape the defense industry?
Right, that's an excellent question, Shelley. And I think data-driven defense technology, in other words, where will the money be spent and what technologies are the future? What are the technologies that will change defense platforms? How can OEMs and local partners push continuous innovation and capability enhancement? Or what are the data and intelligence solutions that will enhance long-term capabilities? What are the challenges to implementing on existing platforms? Those are all the relevant questions that we all have to address as we move forward. And as I think through all those aspects, three things come to mind. One is I think the trends will be towards open architecture. So that will continue to be a trend, I think, as we think through data-driven defense technology. The second, I think, will be a big focus is electronic warfare. I think that in the years to come is going to get more and more emphasis. And the third area, I think, which will continue to be very significant as we go down this technology path is big data and cloud computing. So I think all three of these areas are going to be real drivers, if you will, in terms of future technology.
Excellent. You talked a little bit on it, but could you elaborate on the challenges and opportunities that these technologies present? Obviously, all technologies have good and bad. We're hearing about that with AI, but particular in terms of integrating into the existing systems and frameworks. You talked about having that open architecture, but as you and I both know, many of the defense legacy systems were not created for plug and play. So, what are your thoughts on that integration into these existing systems and frameworks?
Yes, that's a significant challenge, and I think um, the way to address that in the near and longer term is to ensure that as the systems go through their midlife of life upgrades or next level continuous improvement cycles, that it is integrated in a meaningful manner, not just because technology is available, but also because how is that going to serve the overall um, platform? So doing I would say, a detailed engineering analysis of what technologies to be adopted make sense and when, in terms of the various block upgrades that one does, and depending on the overall mission of that platform or service. I think that's important to think through, not just blindly adopt everything that's out there and do it in a systematic way so that because there's a long tail in terms of maintenance and repair and overall and training and logistics depending on what we're talking about. And so tweaking something or adopting some new technology has to also have its follow through pieces all laid out, and unless one has thought through all that, just making a change for the sake of making a change may not yield the results required.
Excellent, excellent. And Dr. Lall, given your unique intersection of technical expertise and strategic vision, alongside your engagement with key international advisory groups and defense councils, how do you envision the role of disruptive technologies like AI, hypersonic systems, and space-based surveillance in shaping future global security architectures?
Kelly, all those areas that you described are, I think, critical to national security, and certainly a lot of focus I know is being put on those. But I think going forward, I cannot stress enough that deterrence against aggression has to be the way to go. And as an example, in the Indian Ocean maritime regions, in order to deter aggression, you need persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability, whether that's collected from space or airborne or surface assets. And I think persistent airborne surveillance of the maritime domain, as an example, is probably the most cost-effective near-term option for like-minded countries to strengthen this deterrence. I think given the massive surface area in question, long endurance uncrewed airborne systems are optimized for providing the necessary persistence. Um, and, given sufficient collection assets, I would like to suggest that, for example, the Quad could establish a mechanism for real-time sensor data sharing in order to create a common operating picture for each of the like-minded members.
Excellent. I'm going to pivot to a lightning round question, and we talked about it a little bit, and you brought up the workforce. And we know in the U.S. we have some workforce challenges. We have a aging workforce here in the United States, and that's being emulated by other nations around the world, like Japan and the European Union. What are some of your thoughts as you travel the world that are some of the best practices to help us entice or encourage or create access points for the next generation of leaders to come into the space, the technology industries, and help be the next generation of leaders here?
Yeah, I personally feel strongly about a very methodical way of doing this through high school and then into college and into this more advanced degrees and certainly at the workplace in terms of training and continuous learning, not only at the entry level, but all the way through one's career. As you know, technology keeps changing, and we have to keep pace with it, and we have to get our workforces, so to speak, updated very much more often than in the past, and that pace continues to increase because um, knowledge is going to be critical. And so uh, I am very bullish on knowledge management and knowledge retention. And certainly, knowledge management is a huge area where the guiding light, let us say, of an organization has an, a responsibility to pass that on to the next set of leaders and so on. And because not everything can be written down, not everything is a science, many things are an art. And whether you're talking about, hardcore technology knowledge or you're talking about quality knowledge and quality control knowledge and so forth, all those things, one can really end up with a significant gap if one has not got a very deliberate continuous learning process in place. And I think spawning young, inspiring young minds in high school and through college and through internship programs um, is one way of making sure we get the interest and the quality of the folks that we need in the industry, but also to keep them engaged, continuous learning even after they're in their roles.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. We're seeing how AI is changing things with note taking and transcribing meetings and I think being adaptable and incorporating that new technology to make all of us more efficient is really important. Being those lifelong learners and being adaptable. I'm going to ask another lightning round question about supply chain resiliency. From your experience, what strategies are most effective in building a resilient supply chain for defense technologies? Do you think dual use technology will strengthen these aspects, and what are some of your initiatives that you've seen work well?
Right. So that's a big area, but I think in supply chain, I think coming to the realization that we live in a globalized world, and so as part of doing business globally, there are certain expectations in many countries across the world that their value add when one does defense trade, as an example, continues to go up, and so. It's no longer just a buying selling relationship between countries. Countries are interested in upskilling and getting workforces developed. They're interested in manufacturing work in logistics work, in maintenance work. And so as you look at your supply chain, no matter how vertically integrated you may start off as, you have to make some buy or make decisions that not only make sense for your own business, but certainly how you then take the business that you're going to, so, not make, but buy, and what are the criteria you set for outsourcing? Um, and beyond outsourcing, what are the parameters you put in place so you still have tight controls on that whole process? Because if you let go too much too quickly, that could be a problem for you, as you are the final responsible entity to put that all together. And certainly when you have, factors like COVID come into play, or other world events, depending on the region that you are, working with or outsourcing to, you have to factor in all those risks um, before you lay out a plan. So I think in supply chain, a lot of the strategy work has to be very methodical and has to be um, revisited, I would say, very much more often, as opposed to just, letting it play out, and to be able to foresee issues before they become issues is very critical.
Excellent. I mean, we know how challenged the aerospace and space industry was during COVID with the supply chains. And, one of the groups that I partner with is Manufacturers Edge, which is part of the Department of Commerce, National Institute of Standards and Technology, to help those manufacturing companies in each state continue to thrive so they can support the aerospace and space industry. As we pivot to our last question, what kind of interview would this be without a policy and regulatory insight from you? So, with your thoughts about the regulatory framework governing global aviation and space exploration, what policy innovations do you believe are necessary to support the rapid advancement and deployment of these technologies in a way that harmonizes with international security and diplomatic objectives?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Shelley. I think we live in a world where there are non-state actors now. We live in a world where we need persistent surveillance, we need robust data sharing between countries, we need constant training cooperation between countries, in particular special forces skills. We need military police force collaborations with asymmetric warfare against rogue states as we've seen them. We need electromagnetic spectrum dominance. We need the ability to correlate petabytes of available sensor data into real-time operational pictures. We need to be able to deliver massive numbers, especially, in my mind, loitering munitions, and while minimizing exposure to personnel. And as we look at all these things and an ability to secure sea lines for commerce, and to maintain logistical dominance, um, all these things require certainly policy and regulatory oversight, and those six buckets of stakeholders, I think, need to be um, very much at the table as some of these policies and frameworks are put together, because it affects all of us. And I think to have forward leaning and forward looking policies and regulatory frameworks, not just domestically but internationally, is going to be critical for like minded nations to pull together to address some of these threats that we face.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Lall. I know our time has gone so quickly, but I wanted to give you the last opportunity for anything else you wanted to share with our audience today about dual use technology, disruptive technology, policy framework, international collaboration, diplomacy. I could go on and on with the areas you're an expert in.
Well, that's very kind of you, Shelley. It's been an honor talking to you. But I think to sum up, I could say that all these areas that you addressed during this session are very critical, and we can probably spend hours on each one of these topics. But I do think that the through series like you have here, just bringing awareness to the issue, and the common thread in all of this, I would say, is workforce development and inspiring younger minds to come into the space and help address these issues in the decades ahead is probably a passion of the guiding light as we, move on into the future. We need to make sure that we have a very robust, active, and inspired workforce, and that I think would be a major area of progress.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lall, for your insights today. You've had added incredible value to this conference. You understand these complex landscapes of defense technology and innovation. The work you're doing not only advances our military capabilities, but also strengthens our nation's security and technological leadership on the global stage. Thank you for sharing your expertise and for contributing to our nation's defense. I would also like to thank America's Future Series for hosting this dynamic discussion today. And until next time, I'm Shelli Brunswick, and I'll see you around the galaxy.